Shank, shank, stabby, stabby. I hate when people call me Gabby. Hello, I am Gabrielle, also known as, or maybe even better known as, fabgogg, because the internet is a thing and my digital footprint is pretty large. Anyway, I am back once again with another OC Lore Speedpaint video. And since this is my second time doing this kind of thing, I'm hoping it'll be somewhat more cohesive. Yes! Yes! Not all over the place like it was last time, but we shall see. So today we have the not so lovely Seth Hayes, or lovely if you're into the whole selfish entitled rich kid gone psychotic drug addict with way too much power pipeline. But again, this is just a judgment-free zone, and I know there's a big Seth fan club on here, YouTube specifically, so I'm excited to shed some light on this guy and his whole deal for you guys. So I kind of give you guys somewhat of an idea of the country and my story and, like, you know, everything that happens, kind of like the dynamic or whatever, and what the whole deal is. Anywho, it's super important to note that Seth is kind of a big deal in Dispatera, the country that my story takes place in, especially the North, since he is the son of William Hayes and Lauren Hayes. William Hayes is the president of Dispatera. Also, just a reminder, if you haven't watched my last video, I go into a bit more detail on the government of Dispatera and the country's dynamic. Just as a little refresher, the type of government is that of a plutocracy. The richest person has the power, to sum it up. So the Hayes family, who, you know, they obviously live in the North, has ruled over Dispatera for quite a while, being that they have monopolies on the oil and fuel markets in a mining country, which is kind of a big deal, as well as some other more suspicious markets. Wink wink nudge nudge, but no one really knows too much about that because it's like unspoken or not acknowledged by like the public, unless you're part of the Dispatera Police Department or the Mafia. Dun dun dun. But other than that, like, other than those high up people, no one really suspects anything, and they're just like, oh yeah, the oil market's like, yeah, that stuff, you've been making a lot of money from that. But yeah, I'm just gonna keep it that way because I don't want to spoil too much, and there's more backstory in the story in the comic, and you will all know in due time. So yeah, there weren't any laws like limiting the power one person or a family could have, so the Hayes were just really fortunate in their lineage and inheritances with companies and stuff, so that's just kind of how it's been. So anyway, back to Seth. I had quite a difficult time trying to figure out what I wanted him to look like. I ended up really harnessing the energy of like, I'm like, entitled jerkwad, who's super pompous. Like, what is it giving me? And then boom, Seth was made. As far as like looks and stuff, a lot of influence had to do with like the 2019 TikTok middle part having e-boy look, since I created him in 2019, so that's pretty funny, but you know, it just stuck and I liked his design. So yeah, but as far as like looks and stature and stuff, like there's nothing really special to him. He's just some lanky white boy, 165 pounds, and he's 6 foot, which is, you know, the perfect height to him, in his opinion, since, you know, he's not too tall and he's not too short. And he takes pride in that because he's like, yeah, baby girl, I'm 6 foot. What you know about that? Anyway. In the beginning of the story, since it starts in the middle of April, which I forgot to mention in the last video, but I guess it was kind of implied since I briefly went through like the whole like Iggy birthday party significance, and he was born, like, his birthday is April 20th, you know, whatever. And anyway, Seth's 21 years old at the beginning of the story. His birthday isn't until August 13th, so that makes him a Leo. And, you know, nothing against Leos or anything, but he's definitely a Leo. He is fierce, he's intense, he's very ambitious, which, you know, they're not bad things, but he does not care what anyone thinks about him. Like, and also, like, it's his way or the highway, like, nothing more to it. People definitely see him as a selfish person, and, like, being a part of the most powerful family in the country doesn't really help with his image. His Myers-Briggs score, MTBI score, whatever, is an ENTPA, so he really loves a good debate, but, you know, with limitations, since the only reason he likes seeing other people's perspectives on things is usually because he likes to prove them wrong and why he's right. That's another thing. He always has to be right about things, even if it hurts someone else's feelings or makes someone embarrassed, or even if he's actually wrong, he always has to be right or have the other person acknowledge that he's right, even if he's not. So he always has to be the smartest one in the room, or at least under the impression that he's the smartest in the room. Narcissist. God complex. Yeah. So he has a hard time showing empathy towards others. That's like another thing. So, you know, it's again, like, it's his way or the highway. That's how he is, and that's how he's pretty much always been. So, to put it simply, he is the definition of gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss, or, you know, like, guy boss, but there is no fixing him. He thinks he's perfect the way that he is, and again, does not care what anyone thinks about him. So in the beginning of the story, his life is too repetitive and boring in his perspective, so he decides to spice things up and to do some research about certain family history things, because, you know, it's still a mystery to him, and, you know, his parents aren't really that open about it, even though they should be, because, you know, he's like, oh, I'm next in line for power, so I have to know. So he eventually starts to really stir the pot. I'm not gonna say how, because spoilers, but you could probably guess from the little reel short video, YouTube short, whatever, with the One More Hour by Tame Impala, that popular one. That gives a lot of insight into him, his relationships, what happens, you know, his spiraling into madness. But anyway, why does he do the terrible things that he does? Is a question you may be asking yourself. And to make a long story short, the strong craving for power and the lack of human empathy is a terrible mix for someone to have. And also being raised as a spoiled, rotten kid, that doesn't help. And neither does the pressure of being next in line to run a whole country and, you know, being in your parents' shadow, or, you know, drugs. Because again, he's always right about everything, regardless of whether or not he actually knows what he's doing. So when it comes to Terabane and all the lurking he ends up doing on his family's connection to the drug, he's basically an expert on it. Which is kind of funny, though, because he knows what could happen to him if he administers it incorrectly, but yet he has that I'm just built different mentality, so he doesn't even see the risks involved, only the reward. Of course, though, things aren't always that simple. However, in his mind, this drug is making him more cutthroat, more cunning, and less attached to people, which is a good thing, at least in his perspective, since the only thing he really cares about is himself. And Keiko. Whoop! And Keiko, not having any interest in Seth at all, just makes her even more of an alluring target for him. She's never impressed with him and wants nothing to do with him. But he's addicted to chasing her, so that just adds excitement to his life. And on the surface, it seems that he doesn't care what she thinks about him, but he loves screwing with her and her potent emotions, because she's very emotional. And I guess something about her is just so irresistible to him, as creepy as that sounds, but it's true. Seth is creepy, period. Whether it be because he finds her cute or because he thinks of her as a vulnerable, small, emotional woman, he would do pretty much anything to have her to himself. And when I say anything, I do really mean anything. Foreshadowing. But as I mentioned in the last video, as for a little gauge and perspective of the type of person Seth is. I mentioned that Iggy could come across sometimes as manipulative, but he's not doing it in the same light as Seth. Like, Iggy's more so persuading people to do what he wants for the greater good, while Seth, like, cold-heartedly manipulates people into believing certain things or doing certain things for his own benefit, and it's always with malicious intent. So it's it's a bad thing. But that's another thing. I don't know where Seth really fits in with myself, because, like, again, like, the personal connections, the moments where I connect to my characters, there are moments where I can be manipulative and a bit selfish, so Seth could have stemmed from that part of me. But I really, really amped up those attributes for dramatic effect, and also to make a good antagonist for the story. And while he may seem all bad in writing or theory or whatever, you can't deny the magnetism he has as a character. Whether it be from his shocking charisma or his mysteriously dark motives, most of you wanted to hear about his backstory, no matter if it was all good news or bad. Because, like, at the polls, like, I think it was like 164 people voted, and like 106 of you guys wanted to hear about him. So I see the Seth fan club. I know it's potent, I know it's alive, and I know it's well. So I am here to provide. Anyway, all in all, though, other than his manipulative and narcissistic tendencies, he does have quite a lot of personality. And there are people that are still willing to befriend him, like Keith Logan. But whether that be out of pure interest, personal gain, or a shared understanding of societal pressures to be just like your parents, you'll just have to wait for the comic to release to find out that little tidbit of info and their whole relationship and dynamic, because it's quite interesting, but also kind of screwed up, but interesting nonetheless. But it has been super interesting to create and write about a character that can switch personalities so fast depending on who he's around. So it's definitely been really fun to flesh out his character and see him come to be his own person. And to go more into his personality, or rather interests, let's talk about music tastes, because that's important. When it comes to music and just style in general, Seth really likes to surround himself with things that make him feel like the main character. Wow, so surprising. But whether that be through how prim and proper he dresses or through the music he listens to, he tends to gravitate towards dramatic and, like, moody vibes. So, like, artists like Life After Youth, Ethan Bortnick, or Suburban, really anyone, you know, who would make the perfect music for a villain, or just a secretly moody young adult who's dealing with a lot of turmoil in his head, even though he's been spoiled his whole life and he doesn't really have a lot to complain about. But, you know, again, he wants to spice his life up because he's just that kind of guy. But yeah, it just fits Seth perfectly because he's really always on demon time, like, for real, for real. I think that's pretty much it for Seth, though. That sums up everything. Or really sums up everything without spoiling too much, because there's a lot to do with his character, and I still want the story to pack a punch, so I'm withholding some information. So yeah, you guys are gonna have to wait for that, but it is what it is. It builds the hype train that I'm trying to put together before it leaves the station. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and the speed paint and the final product of the picture. I like it. I enjoy how it turned out. But yeah, thanks again so much for watching. Thank you again for all of your guys' support. Thank you for 2K. Thank you for 2.25K, I think we're at now, which is crazy. Like, whoa, I'm growing so fast. I love it. And I'm so happy that you guys are showing interest in this stuff, because I love this stuff so much. So yeah. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye. Toodles!